Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Chestnut English Podcast. It's me, your host, Chris. So you might have noticed I stopped saying it's me, your host, Chestnut, because Japanese people can't spell it. And actually, there's been so many times when I try to show someone what I do, and they can't spell chestnut. And it's also hard to remember, I guess, in English. Anyways, I'm just going to go by Chris, which is my real name. All right, so this time it's just going to be me, no guest, no mushroom. I'm not going to be doing much Japanese explanations either. So if you're Japanese or you're just new to English, it's going to be hard for you to understand without subtitles. But where are the subtitles? This is a podcast. There's no way to get subtitles. So that's why I created a new YouTube channel, Chestnut English, and the subtitles are there. So now in Japanese, and then no more Japanese probably. 初級者たち、中級者たち、ちょっと聞いてください。このエピソードはほとんど英語でやるから、ちょっと聞き取りづらいかもしれない。でも、字幕は僕の最近作ったばかりな YouTube チャンネルにあります。このエピソードの内容をもうちょっと詳しく知りたかったら、ぜひ頑張って YouTube で Chestnut English を見てください。I said this episode is hard, so maybe you need to see subtitles on YouTube. Alright, probably no more Japanese. Okay, so first off, let's talk about some stats about this podcast. Stats meaning statistics, like number of views, what kind of device, what app. This is episode 15, and most of you haven't heard episode 14, which is completely fine. You don't have to listen to it. My goal is to probably get maybe 50 episodes or so before the end of the year. I'm also thinking about releasing an episode 0 so that I can tell people listening for the first time, hey, don't listen to episode 1, go listen to this one if you're a beginner of Japanese, or if you want to hear more Japanese, go to this one, or if you want to hear just comedy, go to this one. I think that one would probably be useful. But anyways, onwards with more statistics. Most of you listening to this are using an iPhone, and you're probably using Spotify. If it's not Spotify, it's probably Apple Podcasts. But then I found something funny. One person listening to this podcast is using Amazon Music. That's right. Have you ever heard of Amazon Music? I haven't heard of Amazon Music, and I publish content on there. Anyways, some more statistics. The top 2 episodes ever were second place is episode 2, Valentine's Day Hatsukoi. That's the one where I talked about my first love. Hatsukoi means first love. Her name's Monica, and I mean we were young. It's an old story, but I basically accidentally called her fat, and then she didn't know I was calling her fat, and I didn't know I called her fat either. But it's kind of complicated. But you know, if you know the story, you know the story. なんか恋愛って難しいね。And then the number 1 most popular episode was episode 10, Conversation Between Two Native Speakers. And that's the one where me and Alice just talked about a lot of stuff, like her growing up half Japanese, half British in the UK, and then moving to Japan. And then just random stuff about her learning Japanese, and I think a little bit also about like her learning English, which is a really not surprising story. She just learned it growing up in the UK. But then I thought, wait, so besides these 2 episodes, I also have a bunch of other episodes, like a lot of comedy stuff. Like I have some episodes about stealing bananas in college, and then dressing up as a gorilla. Accidentally going to like a hair loss clinic in Japan and having a lot of confusion with people. But like these are in like other episodes. And there's just a lot of random ass stories that I thought would be more popular, like because the conversation one's really hard to understand. Or maybe people just, like Alice with a native British accent. But then I thought about it some more, and I thought, okay, maybe nobody really wants to hear Japanese. Maybe people want conversation more. Like a lot of the recent episodes I made were beginner, intermediate level, like last week's Shabu Shabu episode, where there's a lot of Japanese explanations. But the Japanese explanations are built into the video. And so like if you don't want to hear the Japanese, you have no way to skip it. And then, if you don't want to hear Japanese, then you're getting like this unwanted audio thrust upon you. So it's probably not valuable to you. It's probably completely useless to you. It's like a waste of time. So then I have this question like, okay, so what percentage of listeners are Japanese? Well, let's hear some more stats. Moving on. So about 60% of all downloads are from Asia, and 50% are from Japan. And the rest of that remaining 10% comes from Taiwan, Vietnam, but it's mostly from Japan, and there's no downloads from China. 20% of all downloads are from the US. I have no idea if these people listening are actually listening to learn English or if they're just listening to it as comedy only. Like I don't really know. And then I found something kind of interesting. 7% of all downloads is from Germany. And I thought, okay, well, Germans are really good at English, so maybe they are listening to this content as comedy, but then I thought, maybe they listen, like they have a habit of like studying English in like all these different ways, and that's why the Germans are so good at English. I mean, I don't know if you can call that racist or anything, but a lot of the Germans that I've met, their English is just really good, and I think something to do with like the German education. They do their English learning really well. Okay, so explain the stats was the hard part, and now talking is the easier part. So at least it is for me. So, what can I conclude from these stats? Conclude meaning with all this information, what do I now know? Two things. Number one, only half of the people listening are in Japan. Only half. The rest of the people listening are from some other place in the world. And maybe they're Japanese people living abroad, maybe not. Maybe they're from another country and they're studying English, like, I don't know, Germans or something. I don't know. By the way, abroad means outside the country, like kaigai. But yeah, I thought almost all the listeners were Japanese, but actually that's not the case. This is like a kind of a reality check for me. Reality check meaning like a curb check, meaning you come across information that's surprisingly different than what you thought. And then number two, Africa has no interest in my podcast. They are the continent with the least downloads this past year. And then there's one more thing. Like one guy, this one, I mean, it's not really important, but I just thought it was kind of funny. One guy listens to this podcast on Amazon Music. Have you ever heard of Amazon Music? No, you haven't. I probably also haven't heard of it until like this podcast, because nobody uses Amazon Music. But then I thought, wouldn't it be kind of interesting if like that number of people listening to this podcast on Amazon Music, if that number goes from 1 to 0, then I'm just imagining someone, I don't know where they are, but they're probably like, one day they stop listening. Man, I don't want to listen to this bullshit. I want to go home and take off my pants and watch anime. I'm just kidding. That's a dramatization, which means it's not 100% a true story. Blah, messed that up. Okay, so the main topic of this episode, comedy. When I say comedy, the image on my mind is like stand-up comedy, maybe like YouTube videos, maybe like improv comedy. And that stand-up comedy is when you have a comedian stand up on a stage and he's got a mic and he just talks. And the stuff that he says is supposed to be funny. For example, like if some comedian starts out, he's saying like, you know what my wife said to me? And then he pauses, he looks around at the audience, and it's not the joke yet, but it's coming soon. He's like, nothing, cause she divorced me. And then people are like, ah. By the way, divorce, it means when married people split up. It's like 離婚する. But it's not just like that kind of comedy, like, like, oh, this is kind of sad, but it's a little bit funny. But there's a lot of different kinds of comedy, like stand-up comedy even. There's different subgenres of stand-up comedy. My favorite of all time to this day is still a guy named Trevor Noah. He's like a South African comedian who is super famous now. And he's got a lot of talent in doing accents. Like he can do Indian accents really well. He's like just really good at telling stories. I think that's his thing. By the way, doing accents means like copying non-native English accents. For example, he's like, I'm going to pretend to be Indian or something, and then he does his own conversation live on stage, and it's a really good content. I think I read his book. I'm kind of like a fan, I guess. He doesn't do stand-up anymore. It's really sad. But yeah, to be honest, I actually don't find a lot of stand-up comedy that funny. I've seen probably a total of like 20 different stand-up comedians in my life. And, that's not just in real life, but like that's including like YouTube, Netflix, and it might not be that much. I'm not like that into stand-up comedy, I guess. But maybe 15 of those 20, I didn't laugh at all. And, maybe I smiled a little bit. But even for like really famous people, like I'm not going to say their names because I feel like it's going to be mean. But, I didn't really laugh at all. And And not laughing, like smiling politely doesn't count as laughing. Okay, smiling politely is like if your friend shows you some video like, dude, check out this comedian, he's really funny. And then like, you're watching the video together and your friend's watching the video, he's already seen it before, and then you're watching it for the first time. And in this moment, you have to smile. You have to smile at least a little bit, or else it's not polite, You can't be like, yo, dude, thanks for showing me this, because we're friends and all, but this isn't funny. This is absolute trash. You can't do that. That's messed up. You have to be like, ha ha ha. And at least that. You gotta have at least that, or else your friend's gonna be sad probably. But yeah, and then as I continue doing this podcast, Chestnut English podcast, it's been like over a year now. I thought a lot more about comedy and like the different formats and stuff. Because my stuff, I want it to be a source of English learning. And if it's entertaining, if it's funny, then that means someone somewhere who understands some or most of the content, not all the content, can still enjoy the content and get free English practice. That's right, listening to the language you want to learn, even if you're not paying attention, even if you don't understand all of it, it's still practice. And of course, the goal is, oh, wait, I want to understand the joke. And then you go like look up some phrase or you look up some slang. And you know what? That's real studying. Looking up stuff definitely counts as real studying. But yeah, this kind of like education comedy, I guess, it brings me like, it brings me to the next 代表的な comedy の イメージ. The next image that pops into my mind when someone says comedy, number 2, is YouTube comedy. So YouTube, I mean, everybody probably knows it. If you're the one guy who listens to this podcast on Amazon Music, maybe you don't know what YouTube is, but probably like 99% of people know what YouTube is. And YouTube, if used for comedy, is a much more flexible venue than stand-up comedy. Like it's a much more flexible way to do comedy. You have so many options. What I mean by that is like stand-up, you have to stand there. It has to be live, and you get a mic and you talk. And it's probably recorded. Maybe it's live. You don't know. But then on YouTube, like you don't have to follow those rules. You can edit the video. You can like cut stuff together. Or if you mess up, you can redo it. Like I messed up this one a lot, so I have to redo it a lot. You can change the camera angle. You can add subtitles, or you can add text that isn't subtitles, so like circle things, like ha ha ha. Look at what this like clown did, or something like that. But basically, YouTube is just a lot more flexible. So like think about a recent YouTube video that you found funny. For example, I like this one guy named Dogen, and he's a English/Japanese like culture language comedy kind of thing. He has a lot of jokes that are rooted in the differences in Japanese culture and American culture, and like the experience of living in Japan as a foreigner, which is a pretty small targeted audience, but I mean I think his content's just really good. And then there's another guy, Davey504. I used to watch more of him, but not so much recently. And his comedy is like, it's really hard to describe. He was originally a bass player, and then he didn't really do like comedy stuff. He didn't really talk. But then now he got really big, and so now he has like a meme-based comedy kind of thing. And he speaks and talks like exclusively almost only in memes. Memes are like a I think in Japanese it's meme, like jokes or phrases or pictures that were born on the internet, and they're usually popular and pretty short. But then all these YouTube videos that I or you find funny, I think there's some kind of human element to it. Like somehow, because you're a fan of this person, the content they make, you find it more favorable. Favorable meaning like you like it more. You are their fan, so if they say it, it's like it comes off as more funny to you. But then if some random stranger on the street says the same thing, then it's not as funny. I mean, I don't really know if that makes sense to you, or maybe you don't agree, or, I probably didn't do a great job explaining it, but I definitely think YouTube stuff has like a much wider variety of capabilities to do comedy. So you can have a lot of different comedy on YouTube. And it's also partially something that's in all the content that's really popular, I think. There's like this feeling of closeness with the YouTube creator. There's like some kind of feeling as if you're friends with the creator. You might not really be friends, but like when you watch the video, you get to know them a little bit more, and then you sometimes get this like fake, maybe slightly real feeling that you're becoming their friend. And I think this feeling, all successful YouTubers have to cultivate it. You have to harvest it. You have to like make good use of it. And so if you have videos, well, like there's videos of where like people after getting popular, they talk about their like personal lives, like introduce their like spouse or their partner. And you see that with Davey 504 too. Like in the beginning, he just made a lot of comedy, a lot of memes and stuff. Bass, or like that's like one of his thing. And then he comes out with stuff like, oh, wife reveal or something like that, or like life reveal, where he reveals things about his wife or reveals things about his life. But yeah, at the heart of it, in the end, like, your content still has to be good to start with. Okay, so that's a really long spiel on like stand-up versus YouTube comedy. Spiel meaning like this long bit, this long part on that topic. So let me try to tell you some funny story before the end so that this episode isn't completely devoid of actual comedy. Devoid meaning empty. Dude, I feel like I'm using a lot of hard words that are totally not necessary. All right, let me pull out some story from my ass and throw it on the table. Oh, I got it. Once I touched my friend's mom's boob. By accident, not on purpose, that's important. I just want to make sure that's clear. But yeah, once in high school, our whole school went to go watch a basketball game, which is a big deal, okay? Because, if I tell people I'm from Oklahoma, people are like, Oklahoma? Where's that? But then if I say Oklahoma, the home of OKC Thunder, then people are like, oh, yeah, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. Like, people know Oklahoma basketball more than actual Oklahoma. And in high school, like, we had a chance to go watch OKC Thunder. Okay, so we're all excited to get out of school. We're like, yeah, we're hyped to go. And I don't know if you've ever been to a basketball game before, but before you get in, there's like a check. There's like a metal detector check. It's not like the airport one. It's a lot smaller. It's like a guy with a metal detector. Okay, and he like waves it over you. He goes, clear, next, clear, next. He's like checking you for like guns or something. And then, so my dumbass, I walk up because it's my turn to get checked. And I raise my arms and I'm like, okay, check me. I got no guns. I'm a good boy. And then this motion, like raising my arms up, I like accidentally bumped into Shaylin. That's like the dude behind me. He's like a classmate of mine. And I was like, oh, sorry, dude. But then I look over and instead of seeing Shaylin, I saw Shaylin's mom. And she's like holding her chest. And what I had scooped was her boob. And it wasn't Shaylin. It was Shaylin's mom's boob. So I like flicked her boob. And then I look up at her. I'm like, oh. And then she looks at me like, was that intentional? And then before I had a chance to answer, the metal detector guy was like, clear, next, sir. And then I'm ashamed to say I didn't say anything. I didn't answer. I didn't say a single word. I just turned around and I walked away. I walked right into that basketball stadium and I never spoke to Shaylin's mom ever again, to this day. Okay, everyone, I hope you liked that little comedy story. Thanks so much for listening to the end. I hope you had fun, and just one more announcement. If you've ever heard of the Japanese comedians called Kamaitachi, they have a radio program called Kamaitachi no Hei Taxi, and I'm going to be coming out on that Monday evening with some coworkers. So that Monday evening is, I think I'll release this podcast and like the YouTube video with the subtitles on the same day, Monday, so March 4th, and then the radio is at 9:30 Japan time. So that's like really early in the US. If you're in the US, you probably don't want to listen to it. And if you've ever listened to Japanese radio, then you're better than me because I've never listened to Japanese radio. You can listen for free on an app called Radiko. It's just Radiko, Radiko. And there's an app, there's a web app, and you can listen for free. You might have to register or something. And then you can also listen to past recordings as well. And it's going to be a 30-minute long episode. And my job on there is like an English teacher. And then the Japanese comedians, like, they're kind of taking a lesson. But, they're comedians, so it's not actually a lesson. It's like more a comedy thing. And it's maybe like 75% in Japanese. There's not that much English. I don't actually come out that much, but I mean, it's a thing. So feel free to tune in if you'd like. Okay, so now I'm going to say that in Japanese. 毎週の月曜日の夜、かまいたちのヘイタクシーというラジオ番組があって、今週の4日、僕と同僚たちがその番組に出るということです。夜の21時半で30分の長さで、75% 以上は日本語で話してるんだけど、僕はちょっと英語教師として時々話します。あと、時々ちょっと教えるんだけど、これはコメディだからね。そんな感じ。 興味あればぜひ聞いてください。Alright. Well, 最後まで聞いてくれてありがとうございます。Thanks for listening to the real end.